Hey, everybody, welcome to episode 7 of the Revenue Diaries. This was a really special one for me. I have known the next guest for years. I worked with him at OpenView, where he is a partner. Blake Bartlett, great human being. We talk about a lot of things. We talk about routines, discipline, reinvention, change, how he thinks about time management, and also his love of cats. Direct quote: He doesn't discriminate against any animals, but he just loves cats. And we talk a little bit about Moose and Walter. Blake's a friend, great VC, and a great human being. So I hope you enjoy. And today's episode, you guessed it, brought to you by Leslie.com. Best coaching, enablement, and training. Check it off. Training enablement software for sales and customer service teams. You can check it out more at lessonly, LESSONLY.com. All right, enjoy, everybody. I'm pleased to welcome someone I'm lucky to call a friend, product-led growth prophet. I made that up for you, Blake. And the best and only venture capitalist we will have on this show, perhaps ever. Blake Bartlett, welcome to the show. Why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Hey, Kyle, it's really great to be here. Really great to see you over video. I wish that it was in person, but it's awesome to be on the show. And yeah, I'm a VC and I work at OpenView. I've been doing VC investing for the last 13 years.
Where were you at before OpenView?
I was at Battery Ventures, also in Boston.
Awesome. All right. So Blake, didn't get these questions ahead of time. How are you feeling right now, Blake? Feeling all right?
Nervous on the spot.
All right. So we usually start with a softball question just to warm us up. And Blake and I were talking about this before we jumped on. I did some research and found your Pinterest account, which is aptly subtitled Blake Bartlett on One's Body. It's the subtitle of this account. And we confirm this is Blake. It's old Blake. I have things online that Blake can probably find that is also embarrassing on my part. Your pins are extremely fashionable, I might add. But all kidding aside, you tend to be on the right side of clothing trends. How do you think about your style? Do you think about it? When do you know it's time to change it up?
Yeah, my style has evolved a lot and is constantly evolving. I think that's the only constant. And if you do some Googling, and I actually had this conversation with a former colleague recently, people who knew me from 10 years ago when I was first getting into VC knew me as a guy who wore wool pants and a button-down shirt tucked in with a VC vest, like your classic mid-2000s VC look.
Yeah.
And now I'm known for the backyards hat and tattoos and wearing all black. So it has evolved notably, but in relatively small increments. And it's just kind of leaning into it, being comfortable, and thinking about what actually I am comfortable wearing, and also like how I feel comfortable sort of showing myself. And honestly, sometimes it's just like I'll find one thing and I'll just like get obsessed with it and I try to standardize on it. I'm not to the point where it's like I have a true uniform. But like for a while, I'm wearing one right now. I got these, I got really into Carhartt long sleeve t-shirts. And so that's all I wore for like 2 years, and I still wear them often. And then I got this other sort of crew neck sweatshirt that I loved. And so I got it in a bunch of different colors, and I just wore crew necks every single day for like a year. Now I'm kind of onto like hoodies and backwards hats, but yeah, we'll see what happens next. Season by season, it changes.
You're in good company, because I interviewed Dave Gerhardt, and he bought a bunch of black Hanes t-shirts, and that's all he wears with his Jordans. Jeans,
Way to go, man.
Hanes t-shirt, and black. I mean, black seems to be in, right?
It's in.
Speaking of black, your wife Cara is an entrepreneur. She owns and is the head designer of the clothing line Veta. I encourage everybody to check it out. My wife loves her dress. Thank you for that, Blake, by the way. I imagine that you're both pretty damn busy in general. How do you handle just the busy routine of life and staying fresh in a marriage when you're both just so active, professionally and personally, I'm guessing.
Yeah, it's definitely a challenge. Entrepreneur running a business, she's been running it for the last 4+ years. That is more than a full-time job, and then some. And
Yeah.
then being a VC, also, just constantly on planes, traveling all over the place, board meetings, that kind of stuff. And so it can be very easy to be married and live in the same place and not actually see one another. So that's the first thing, is make sure you plan to actually spend time with one another, and you actually have to like proactively do that. But even if you are in the same physical place, it can be very easy to be distracted, and it can be very easy to sort of be, mentally, emotionally elsewhere. And so carving out routines and times, whether it's like a, go to date night, not rocket science, or, carved out times in the week when you can kind of have that more, how are you doing? What's going on? You need to talk about some of the logistics, but you also need to talk about, what's going on, kind of behind the scenes and
Yeah.
upstairs, and emotionally speaking. And so my wife and I actually end up doing that a lot on Sunday mornings, and kind of carve out that time, because the evenings are like really, really hard to predict. They become more predictable during COVID because our routine is much more standardized.
Yeah. Right.
But for a while there, it was like Sunday mornings was the one time we reliably knew we could count on. So yeah, those rhythms, and then just sort of being conscious about everything, is the name of the game.
Do you guys book on each other's calendar, like time to talk, or we're going to have dinner? Do you
We
go
do
that
not.
far?
I honestly aspire to be a little bit more of a productivity junkie. But I am a little bit more fly by the seat of my pants, and like my to-do list is on average,
Yeah.
in my head. And so it's a little bit more organic than
Okay. That's good though. So I hear you love cats.
that. That is a
Is
true statement.
is that true? Like
100% true.
what level? It's like I have a couple sources that help me with some of these questions, and I couldn't figure out if they were setting me up for like failure. Like you would have said, "What in the hell are you talking about? I hate cats." But on what level do you love cats? And I and
So
I don't
I'm
know, I don't know if it's 1 to 10, or if it's like I have one cat, or I like cat cafes. Like where do you fall on the cat level?
I'm a huge fan of cats. I grew up with all different kinds of animals, and pets. I don't discriminate. I like cats. I like dogs. I like birds and all the rest. But for whatever reason, from a young age, I always was drawn to our cats, and kind of always had a special bond with my special little furry friends, and it just kind of stuck with me. Now, the majority of my adult life, there was not a great context to have cats,
Right.
with roommates and whatnot. And, it's not a shared love by everybody that I know. But then once I got married, my immediate campaign was, with my wife, to say, like, we got to get a cat. When are we going to do this? And she was very skeptical. But we had this compromise, because she's a little bit more of a dog person. So we started Googling and said, what is the most dog-like cat? Can we have the best of both worlds? And we arrived on a specific breed of cat called a Maine Coon, which, if you know anything about Maine
I
Coon
don't.
cats, they are the largest breed of domesticated cat that exists. So we have this enormous, 20+ pound cat,
Ouch.
that also is like extremely furry. So it looks like, a small lynx walking around our house. And then the dog-like elements is, it greets you at the door, instead of barking, it meows, but you can teach it how to high five, which we have done. You can teach
Nice.
it how to play fetch, and so it has been indeed the best of both worlds.
That's
His
amazing.
name is Moose, and he's my little
Moose.
buddy.
Moose. How long have you had Moose?
We've had Moose for, I think, about 4 years now, 4 or 5.
Nice. So
And
you've
then
got,
we got him a buddy, because the one thing
of
with
course.
with him is that he was, unwieldy, and did not like being by himself. He was so social. So, with back to the schedule thing, the two of us having a crazy schedule, he would come home and be very stressed. So we got him a buddy, and his buddy's name is Walter. So we had two small little boy cats, and they are great.
So you've got about 20 years left on the
Yes,
cat
yeah,
lives
something
then.
like that.
All right. That's awesome. Okay, so a little bit of shift here. You talk I love the fact that you love cats. I'm just gonna say that. I'm not a huge cat fan, but the fact that you do, I appreciate that. You talk a lot about reinvention, mainly around sales and marketing leaders, as it, well, I guess all revenue leaders, as it pertains to product-led growth. But how do you think about reinvention in your own life and career?
Yeah, honestly, I get bored very easily. And so if I find myself boring myself, it's like, how many times have I said this line? How many times have I given this pitch? How many times have I presented something this way? And if it starts to bore me, even if it's the first time that person has ever heard it, the boredom or the sort of the inner sort of cringing of like, this is the 100th time I've said this, will also come through in my presentation. And so anytime I'm feeling that way, it's just kind of a recognition of like, all right, we got to change things up here. And it could be extremely subtle, or it could be, much bigger. But usually it's my own internal barometer for boredom that tells me it's time to evolve.
How long does that last? Is that like a month in Blake Bartlett's world? A couple weeks? I guess it's dependent on your feeling. It's just gut. Like you're done with the Carhartt and you move on to something else. Like what? Is there a timeline?
I'd say it's usually like every few months.
Okay.
Yeah,
60 days, 60, 90 days.
something like that. Yeah, some things is switching up. It could be small, it could be big, but yeah, constant evolution.
Love it. All right. Why do investors call money dry powder? You've used that on a couple interviews that I read last night, and you use the term dry powder. I get the concept, but I hear it all the time, and it's mostly from VCs or PE, people in private equity. Why is it called dry powder? Do you still call it dry powder?
It's definitely called dry powder. I did not come up with the term, but it's one of those
I know
things
you
that like
didn't.
every industry has its
Oh yeah.
sayings and its slogans, and VC is rife with all the sayings and slogans that you can imagine. And for whatever reason, dry powder is the way that people referred to. We raised a fund and we still have a lot of that fund left to deploy. So therefore we have a lot of dry powder. It brings up a really strange Revolutionary War era sort of
Yeah.
illustration as to like what you're going to do with said dry powder, but
Or
I don't know
burning
where
the
it
dry
came from,
powder.
but that's what it's all about.
Oh, I love it, man. I was like, I have to ask that because he's
Yeah,
all right.
that's
Last
weird.
one. I think it's really interesting that you are all about reinvention and you change stuff up all the time. But the reason that you left Battery to join OpenView was because of the singular focus. We both know that anyone who has worked at OpenView or works at OpenView is kind of instilled with this idea of focus, whether it's focus on the right mix of deals, focus on the right industry, focus on the right segment. How do you apply the same rigor and focus to your personal life that you very much use in your professional as you like switch up stuff all the time on the personal side?
Honestly, so the biggest way in which it comes out, I would say, is that this is a completely different personal angle, but I'm very, very introverted, and to like classically introverted, to where spending time with others, sort of drains me of energy, and spending time sort of alone fills me back up.
Hmm.
And so my job is very much spending time with others. I oftentimes will refer to VC as being, your job is kind of a professional meter. You just go and meet people all the time.
Hmm.
And while I really, really enjoy it and I can turn on that sort of engagement, I get to the end of the day, and certainly at the end of the week, and I'm just completely drained. And so it just means that there's a lot less on the margin to give, especially socially speaking. And other commitments wise, like I feel like my life, 9 to 5, so to speak, is just like coordinating logistics and finding times to
Hmm.
meet and like all this stuff. And so then when it becomes like Saturday and Sunday, the last thing in the world that I have capacity for is more of that. But I also can't just be entirely isolated. So I think the discipline of learning how to say no to
Hmm.
as many potential distractions so that you can say yes to the few things that matter, is sort of what I think makes sense in business, but it also happens to work really well for me because I'm wired to be a very much an introvert.
So you might change things constantly, 60, whatever, 90-day increments, but you're focused on those specific few things in that time period. Is that kind
Yeah,
of, yeah. Okay.
yeah. I kind of
Awesome.
think about it as like, if you have sort of a narrow swim lane, but then within that swim lane, you can iterate and be creative and sort of reinvent within that swim lane. But you've sort of set the parameters. If I think about it within
Mhm.
VC, at OpenView, we only invest in B2B software companies, so SaaS and infrastructure. And within that, there's a million different types of industries and products and approaches and people and geographies and all the rest that you can invest in. there's a million different ways to sort of build those businesses and help those businesses and attract those businesses. But I don't have to worry about, should I be chasing fintech right now? Like, should I be chasing crypto right now? It's like, I have sufficient blinders on, but not so much that it's, myopically focused. And so I think finding that balance of being able to like set some parameters and say, this is my swim lane. And then once you're within that swim lane, give yourself full license to be as creative and iterative and, kind of all over the place as you want. And I think that will help drive sort of an interesting creative process forward.
Love it. All right, last question. At the time of this launch, we're hoping thousands of people are listening to this, of sales and marketing leaders. What's one piece of advice that you have for sales, marketing, customer success, revenue leaders that are in this world of scaling software?
So today we view that there's a new era of software. I call it the end user era. And really that just means that end users are the primary gatekeeper for getting access to a new customer, as opposed to the old way, which was the primary gatekeeper was the executive who held budget. It was all about the champion. Find the champion. Is it the right champion? Are they qualified? Do they have budget? If so, all right, move them through the funnel and try to get to a gong. In the world where, if we think about how did you adopt Slack, how did you adopt Zoom, how did you adopt Calendly, whatever the product may be, that has this more self-service, bottoms-up motion, product-led growth motion, as we call it, the person that found that product and brought it into the organization was probably an individual contributor or somebody lower in the organization, not necessarily that C-level or VP level executive. And so bearing that in mind and bearing that, it's not just Slack, these are not just the exceptions, increasingly more and more, depending on, regardless of the product that you're selling and regardless of the industry that you're selling it to, more and more people are finding the tools that they want and they're bringing them to work. And so because of this end user era, and I think if you fast forward the tapes 10 years from now, of where are we going to be in 2030, I think this really will be the industry standard for how basically all software is sort of found and brought into a new organization. And so that's a long way to say, focus on that end user and make sure to serve that end user with the product that you build, but also with how you think about go to market. Because increasingly, that top down sort of inside sales sort of driven approach, will just continue to be, more and more dated over time. And so, focusing on that end user, extremely critical.
Awesome. Thanks, Blake. Speaking of product-led growth, if you want to go learn more about it, where can people find you? Not like in person, but like digitally on the interwebs and not Pinterest.
The best place is LinkedIn. So I'm posting daily on LinkedIn about product-led growth. And you can also go to the OpenView blog, where there's tons of stuff about product-led growth from me and from many other great minds as well.
Yeah, it's great. It's the best place to go learn. All right. Thanks again, Blake.